Well, hello and welcome to The Mariner with me, Chris Stanmore Major. Now, in today's episode, I want to look at the events of the recent Sydney Hobart Race. Okay, well, let's have a look now at the footage that came out of Australia after this terrible circumstance in the Sydney Hobart event. This was actually the first report that I saw about it. Remind yourself exactly of what happened by just listening in on this report. Let's have a see.
Good evening. The Sydney to Hobart has been rocked by its worst tragedy in nearly 30 years. Two experienced sailors have been killed in separate incidents as treacherous conditions hit the race.
Terrible.
Back on dry
Can't
land,
imagine
the
how these
boat
guys
line crew
feel.
docks at Bateman's Bay without one of their own. A heartbreaking journey to shore too, Flying Fish Arctos arriving at Jervis Bay, both losing sailors at sea.
They are shaken up from what they've seen and what they've had
That
to do.
looked there like there was something going on the port side of the
from
cockpit.
Western Australia, a sailor with more than 20 years experience,
Sorry,
and
buddy.
the navigator on board Flying Fish Arctos, and Nick Smith, a 65-year-old South Australian on board Bowline, competing in the Sydney to Hobart
So that's him there,
for the
right?
fifth time.
Being pretty competent there.
It was just before midnight when the first tragedy struck Flying Fish Arctos, roughly 30 nautical miles off the coast of Ulladulla, when Quaden was killed by a swinging boom. Just after
So that's
2
an
a.m.,
impact
not
directly
far
from the
away,
boom,
Smith,
Lord.
on
And this
board
is only like
Bowline,
5,
also lost his
maybe
life.
10 miles
Nick
away,
is a
not even
very
that.
experienced sailor. He was hit by
Crazy.
the main sheet, and the
Was
main
it like a
sheet
weather
threw
pattern they were
him
going through and they were
across the
all
boat,
reefing and they were all
and
caught by
unfortunately he
a
hit his
change in
head
the
on
breeze
winch,
2 hours apart there? I
and
don't know.
that's what killed him.
Gallantly,
Hopefully
they
we'll find
provided
out more
CPR
later.
to their crew member through the night while they waited for police to attend, and they didn't give up.
Flying Fish
Bless.
Arctos, a crew of 12, some of them amateurs, is based at Sydney's Middle Harbour Yacht Club. Bowline, a group of 8 experienced sailors from the Royal
That's Nick
South
there, right?
Australian Yacht Squadron.
They're devastated during this time.
I spoke to skipper Ian Roberts just yesterday. You heard the forecasts. Does that worry you at all?
No, I think a lot of the forecasts for big conditions are for the big boats.
From the Prime Minister, the Sydney to Hobart is an Australian tradition.
I think this is
and
worth
it is
just
heartbreaking
looking
that 2
here.
lives have been lost at what should be a time of
What
joy.
they say, I remember
With
this.
2 fatalities today, event organisers were questioned why the race ever went ahead in the face of such treacherous conditions and if it should now be cancelled. Tonight,
No.
police and the crew...
That's absolute garbage. And, you know, when you sign that waiver, that is what's happening. We don't want to have it where people are second guessing what happens in sailing and turning it into something where you can't go out if there's any kind of wind at all. This is one of the frontiers where people can go and make a choice. You also get to ride dirt bikes and you should be able to choose what goes into your body, what comes out of your body. Everybody gets the choice and then they live by that. And people should be going and doing these things because they're passionate about it, because they love it, because they want to develop themselves. They understand the risks, they're trained to the risks, and they inherently understand that to be engaged in this, you know, can have very serious outcomes. And then we do everything we can like this to mitigate them. The Mariners Library is supported by Edward William Marine Insurance. If you're looking for a new policy on your boat or to upgrade the policy that you already have, check out edwardwilliam.com and get a free quote. And if you follow the link in the podcast description or use the code Mariner10 at checkout, you get an exclusive 10% discount deal and help support the production of the Mariners Library. What we're going to do today is we're going to have a look at a few different aspects. We're going to look at these accidents. We're going to look at the waivers which are in place when you enter one of these races. I think it's an important place to start from because we have to understand first that everybody getting involved in this does it of their own free volition, okay? And I want to look now at the Fastnet race, which is coming up. And actually, we're going to be entering the Fastnet race here today live on the episode and looking at some of the waivers which anybody who owns a boat, manages a boat, or indeed skippers a boat in a race should be very aware of. This now from the last edition of the Fastnet.
Extreme weather conditions, adversity, and endurance. The 2023 Rolex Fastnet Race.
Beautiful.
As this special
Downing
50th
cows.
edition draws to a close, it has
Look
more
at the
than lived up
conditions. Look
to
how
its
heavy it is in
reputation
Solent.
as one of
Some
the
people have
greatest
seriously
offshore
debriefed
challenges
there.
on the planet.
This edition was even more fantastic because of the star. I've never experienced such waves before.
The waves kind of following the
Beautiful.
coast, and we had some of the biggest one I've ever seen in Solent.
The start, it was about not breaking the boat, getting out, not necessarily being the fastest, but
A lot of the times in
coming
the
home in one
Solent
piece.
obviously is to do with which way the
Brutal
tide's
and
coming
hard.
through Hurst.
And so we were eking out every little knot of boat speed we could.
The coast of Ireland looks really beautiful. It was sunny and perfect.
Nice.
Glassy, calm water and no wind. We saw minke whales, we saw dolphins.
The rock's the iconic image. Everything
Yeah.
you see about the race, it's always a photo of the rock. Something not a lot of people get to do.
This is what we go sailing for, eh? This is it. This is what draws us out into danger every time.
Arriving in Cherbourg was really fantastic.
Beautiful.
And the welcoming is amazing. And Cherbourg made something very special here.
You feel a little
And for those
euphoric.
that know this race
The
so
Rolex
old, of course,
Fastnet
they
race
finish
is
now in
a
Cherbourg
huge
rather than
challenge from a
Plymouth.
sailing point of view. It's a huge sense of accomplishment to have completed it.
Whilst for many the goal was just to finish this extraordinary race, there were rewards for exemplary performances. Most notably, the coveted Fastnet Challenge Cup, awarded to the race's overall winner, Caro. Another truly memorable edition of the Rolex Fastnet Race.
Beautiful. If we click over here now to this next page, this is the entry form for the Rolex Fastnet Race. That was the video there from the 2023 edition. This is the entrance for the for this edition. As you can see, it's Wednesday the 15th today. I want to have a look at the top sections here. This is the disclaimer and the media waiver that is provided by the Royal Ocean Racing Club. Sailing is by its nature an unpredictable sport and therefore inherently involves an element of risk. By taking part in the event, each competitor agrees and acknowledges that they are aware of the inherent element of risk involved in the sport and accept responsibility for the exposure of themselves, their crew and their boat to such inherent risk. Whilst taking part in the event, they are responsible for the safety of themselves, their crew, their boat and their other property, whether afloat or ashore. The provision of a race management team and other officials and volunteers by the event organizer does not relieve them of their own responsibilities. They are responsible for ensuring that their boat is equipped and seaworthy so as to face extremes of weather, that there is crew sufficient in number, experience and fitness to withstand such weather, and that the safety equipment is properly maintained, stowed, in date and familiar to the crew. Okay, this is literally my entry form now for this event. This is what we're signing, so I'll just go slightly out of shot here and click I agree. Okay, and that brings us to here, and now it's for me to put in all the details for the boat, and we're ready to enter the Fastnet race here. They say, well, you shouldn't have set off. Shouldn't have set off. We can see images there from the start of the race. It's completely fine. Can they get out of the harbour in very, very serious conditions? I think then they would think of delaying the race. I've set off on a leg of a round the world yacht race, twice in fact, where we've delayed the start of the race because conditions just to get out to the start line would have been horrendous. But once the vessel's through the start line, that is the skipper's decision to move on. These skippers are not coming to this from nowhere. They know what they're doing. The race organisers are checking to know that people know what they're doing. All of the invigilation that happens beforehand, all the checking of all the safety gear. Let's Rourke doing this race, doing the Fastnet race. The boats were safe. It was safe for the boats to go out. It's the skipper's decision whether to continue racing. The reality is that all the other boats had no problem at all. On board these two boats, then we've got this terrible circumstance where the same piece of equipment, the boom, the main sheet, the whole kind of contrivance has ended up ending these Roy and Nick's lives. So let's have a look now at what I would describe as a shocking piece of footage, which is available on YouTube. We're not going anywhere that we shouldn't be going to get this. This is from the 2009 Volvo race. It's on board Ericsson. So very light conditions. Oei, dag.
It was bad.
Great to see the crew step in pretty quickly there, and let's just have a look at that a little bit more slowly so we can understand the nature of what's happening. The setup here is that they have a little preventer. It's not really a preventer. I actually did a run through on this a couple times before I even realized that the main is sort of tied off. That is not a competent way to tie off the boom. A preventer is any line that stops something from moving. So the fact that it moved means that wasn't a preventer. If it was very, very light conditions in port, maybe that would hold, but with that mainsail moving around, it's like a bullwhip, and the boom is at the end of the whip. When a whip moves, it goes so fast that it moves its tip at supersonic speeds, and that's what makes the noise. The boom is at the end of the whip here. The mainsail on this boat, it's a 135-foot mast. The mainsail is about 180 square meters. It's like 1,600 square foot, something like that. This is a fantastic opportunity to see, you know, the fact that this can happen to anybody at any time. This is a super professional boat in very light conditions. There's no way that anybody was expecting anything like this to happen, but that main has been invited down into the cockpit zone because they've got it sheeted off in this way. You see they've got the big strop there that is so that when the crewman comes through, he's not holding onto the main sheet. So they're thinking safety, but it doesn't help. If we look in this freeze frame, I've got it. Look, the wind is actually on the starboard side of the boat. The boom is about to go the other way. That sail has already moved across at the top. The battens have all popped through, maybe. Hopefully most of them popped through, and now it's fully powered up and it's going where it's going. And where it's going is to the other extent of its travel. So the thing always with the mainsail is that if it can get to you, then it might get to you. And so you have to make sure you stay out of the zone where it can get to. Now, if you lose the main sheet, you know, it can be anywhere. But normally it's going to be moving in a particular arc, and it's going to have a particular range of height available, and you have to be not in that. The safest place to be with the boom is behind the traveller or forward of the gooseneck. If you're hoisting the sails, when you're reefing, that kind of stuff, try and clear out the cockpit area. Certainly with races at the beginning, I find that's an area where it's all a bit frantic and people are getting the mainsail up. They're not really looking around inside their boat. They're looking around on the race course, and that can be a time when they get walloped on the side of the head as well. But the boom's very low. This kind of motion, I have an internal like alarm that goes off in these situations because I know what the boom can be like. In this situation now, he steps forward. He's a bit unsteady, you can see there. Here comes, now there's another undulation coming in the mainsail here as it comes down. There it is, it's coming, it arrives. And at this point, you see now the load for that is on that preventer away to starboard, and that's not going to hold whatsoever. Okay. Gone. Oy. Wow, big hit. And the thing there, of course, is where he's going to. Now, we won't get into it because we don't want to be kind of getting through the details of this kind of thing, but he ends up with a contusion at the front. We'd be looking, obviously, for like a depressed skull fracture in the front of his head. We've got traumatic brain injury potential because of the shaking inside the brain pan, but also where he comes down to. On these boats, you can see down here on the starboard side, the side decks curve away and the main sheet track is on the deck and the car is there, so it's out the way. You don't have to step over it so much, but it means there's this kind of edge which if you're flying back, then you can actually catch the edge of the edge of the deck there, like the equivalent of the cockpit seats. You can catch your head on that. We know that in the incident in the Sydney Hobart, it was being propelled by the main sheet into a winch is where that's happened. You can see some of the force here. Obviously smaller boats won't be able to do this quite so easily, but they can do a version of this. If it's a bigger boom and it's a bigger slop that the boat goes over, a 40-50 foot boat can hit with that kind of pressure. Just the the Volvo 70 can do it in 5 knots. These kind of conditions, in many ways, light airs are just as troubling to me as very heavy airs, but it's a much more apparent to the crew in heavy airs. So let's bring ourselves back round now to the Sydney Hobart and what's happened there. I want to draw your attention to this boat just momentarily before we do it. Okay, so this is the video from Lady K sailing about a tragic accident that happened actually not too far south of Nova Scotia just a little while ago. the couple that own this boat had been both killed by the boom on the boat, which is basically, it's kind of impossible to understand. But if you don't know what you're doing and you're in that situation, it's just like being Indiana Jones and running straight in front of the ball until the ball catches up with you. In this kind of situation, we can see that CMB 66 here, I used to skipper a CMB 60 in Hong Kong. I know these boats quite well. The boom is very high and it has a power vang underneath it which holds the boom up. It's not necessary for the boom to be held up by anything else. But if you get into a situation where you're trying to get the mainsail down and the mainsail is no longer holding the boom up, then the boom can bounce up and down. Then it will compress the spring, and if it's swinging wildly from one side to another, I think in this situation they actually ended up with losing the end of the main sheet. It's go and have a look at this video from Lady K. It's very, very good stuff he does. I love that he's trying to make people safer like this. But if we just watch this little bit here,
18,
this is the boat as it would be in port, obviously. In fact, is that not Newport? I think that's Newport.
The trigger, which is a huge thing.
And then this is it when they went and salvaged it. You see, the boom has been gotten under control here. The main sheet's under control, but look how low it is, and the bimini's been totally mangled. This kind of boom in this situation is just a spring in this power vang, and that starts moving around. When it's slack, you must be forward of the gooseneck or you must be aft of the traveller, completely away from anywhere that the boom can get you. If the boom can get you, it might get to you, and that's how you have to think all the time. And on this boat, it may even come a little bit lower than that. If I seem to remember, when that comes right down, it will come to like 3 foot off the side of the side deck there. Back in the day, you'd have boom gallows, which would then be standing up and would be something that you put the boom into, but also just the posts of it meant that the boom, if it gets low and it gets out of control, it would whack up against that before it would whack up against a person in the cockpit. But we don't fit that anymore. It's not an aesthetic that we like anymore. But in these situations, it would have been something that had made all the difference, right? Okay. Let's have a look now. We were talking about the main sheet is what has been the deciding factor in one of these fatalities on the Sydney Hobart. This is the report done by the Marine Accident Investigation Bureau after a fatality on board one of the clipper boats going around the world in 2015. Now, as you know, I was a skipper on board one of the clipper boats. My race was in 2009-2010. It's a 43,000-mile trip around the world. To do one of those events, you have 20 crew on board and you're the only professional sailor. Latterly, Clipper is now putting another qualified person on board, but certainly when I did it and when this accident happened, the only professional on board is the captain, and that person cannot be on deck all of the time, which means that you then have a situation where less skilled people are the watch leaders. And in this circumstance, unfortunately, that watch leader was very seriously unfortunately, in this situation, the watch leader was killed by what happened. These are not the kind of details that we really want to have to go through, right? We want to go to sailing and we want to enjoy ourselves, but we have to stay sensible to the fact that these things can happen. We need to learn these lessons, if only to honour the memories of those that go before us. At 23:56 on the 4th of September 2015, UTC +1, Andrew Ashman, a watch leader on the UK registered yacht CV21 Charlie Victor 21, was fatally injured when the yacht experienced 2 successive uncontrolled jibes while 122 nautical miles west of Porto, Portugal. CV21 was one of 12 identical yachts participating in the 2015-16 Clipper Round the World race with a complement of a professional skipper and 21 fee-paying crew. Before the accident, CV21 had been sailing under its Yankee 1 headsail and full mainsail on a broad starboard reach when, due to increasing winds, Andrew decided that it was necessary to reef the mainsail. Now, I just remind you in this circumstance that Andrew is not a professional sailor. He is someone who has been nominated as watch leader during the process of training and the initial bits on the water in the race, and he is now looking to lead those on deck, but is not a professional sailor. He had stepped forward of the main sheet traveller to brief the crew when the yacht altered course. This caused the wind to catch the leech of the mainsail, putting the sail aback, causing tension on the preventer line. The forward strop securing the preventer line to the bow broke, releasing the boom, which then moved swiftly to starboard across the cockpit in an accidental and uncontrolled jibe. The yacht then performed a second uncontrolled jibe with the boom swinging back onto the port side before the helmsman was able to regain control. During the uncontrolled jibes, Andrew sustained a fatal neck injury and, despite the efforts of his crewmates, could not be resuscitated. What happened was that Andrew, as the watch leader, stepped forward of the traveller but still had his safety tether attached behind the traveller. When he stepped forward of the traveller, his safety tether was now across the area where the main sheet could move. When the main sheet unexpectedly rose up and moved very, very quickly to the other side, it took control of his strop, shortening it with a vector load, and with a very strong force pulled Andrew down towards the deck, where he sustained a neck injury, which unfortunately led to him losing his life. The main sheet was the thing that caused the accident. You can be thrown by being in direct contact with the main sheet. You can have fingers removed by the main sheet going through its block. Your tether in conjunction with the main sheet can throw you and injure you. The boom can hit you in heavy weather and in light weather if it's invited down into the cockpit by whatever, or if it gets out of control, or if the main halyard breaks and the boom comes down. All of these things can lead to the kind of accidents that we've seen here on the Sydney Hobart Race. The Clipper event afterwards came up with a number of things that they were looking to change, as you might imagine. It says that he sustained a high impact neck injury that is believed to have killed him instantly. It's a high risk area taught to the crew during the training because of the danger of being hit by the boom. That's Clipper's own words on their website. I worked for Clipper for a year as a round the world race skipper, and I know that Clipper's training on this was very clear. They'd had an injury in the 90s where someone got caught up in the main sheet and ended up losing a leg, and so they were very aware of the fact that staying out of the main sheet area was absolutely essential, and we impressed that upon the crew every day during training and every second day out at sea and in changing conditions, and anytime anyone's passing through that area. If I'd been a Clipper crew, if I'd been a Clipper skipper, and the crewman that we saw there on the this incident here on the Volvo race, as soon as that crewman got to this location and I saw what was about to happen, I would have already been telling him, hey, whoa, don't go near that main boom. Don't go near the boom right now. That is... Well, actually, I paused it right at the moment where it's about to, do what it does, which is change sides very, very quickly. So Clipper instigated a number of things that made it safer, and that was keeping people away from the main sheet. There are a number of scenarios which may cause this to happen. In this instance, the boat performed an accidental double jibe, resulting in the failure of the strop holding a 4-guy preventer line. But it doesn't matter, how many people are effectively using preventers on boats. If you've got something connected between the boom just around where the van connects and like the side deck, that is not going to do anything. That's going to snap immediately. On the Clipper boats, we have a guy that goes all the way to the bow, turns on a block there, goes out as a Dyneema rope, and then connects to a piece of three-strand twisted nylon rope which has stretch in it, and the idea is that you put a lot of tension on all that lot, but that bit of nylon rope in there is enough give that the boom can stretch the line and slowly go over to one side, which gives everybody very ample warning to get the hell out of the way for when it perhaps comes back. The other thing is training the crew to not get into a situation where there's a crash jibe. I had to do that on my Clipper boat, and I did it by turning off the wind instruments quite regularly so that they learnt to very quickly take control of the boat by using the stimulus around them and not be just looking at a load of instruments and then have the boat jibe. We don't know if these guys jibed or what was the situation on board the Sydney Hobart Race, but certainly we can see here from this evidence that jibing the boat, the main sheet gets free. It can very easily turn into a fatality, a very serious injury, if the main sheet gets loose in that kind of scenario, particularly with people who are new to the boat, new to the situation. Okay, well, that's the end today of this. If you're interested in replacing your marine policy, have a look at edwardwilliam.com. And if you follow the link in the description, you get a 10% discount at checkout and also help support this Mariner podcast. So thank you very much for listening today. I hope that wherever you are safe and sound. And I look forward to speaking to you in the next one. Cheers.